Hey everyone, this is Moebius Models Battlestar Pegasus from Battlestar Galactica, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how I built this up from start to finish, how I emptied out the flight pods so you can see all the way through, and how I made some other modifications, how I applied this really nice speckly paneling effect, and everything else including the decals, the weathering, the battle damage. So if you're looking for inspiration, for guidance on how to build this kit, or if you're just here just to watch me build it up, then grab a tea or a coffee, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the build. Hey everyone, Sam here at Model Chili Scale Models, and here is Moebius Models Battlestar Pegasus from Battlestar Galactica. Yep, it's the beast herself in a 1:4105 scale, and I know these kits are getting pretty hard to find these days, so hopefully I'll do this ship justice and not screw it up too badly. But yeah, let's have a quick look at the back of the box. So we just got some nice pictures of the finished model itself. I'm not going to be using any Aztecing or paneling decals for this, so it's just going to be a pure construction and paint job. And yeah, we'll see how it turns out in the end. So let's start by having a look inside the box. Alrighty, so we've got the instruction booklet, all in black and white, just with basic assembly instructions. So you got the flight pods, and then the main hull. Looks like a fairly basic construction. There's only small details like the railgun turrets around the edges there, and the engine detail. There's a little bit of complexity to it, but overall it's pretty simple and solid, so it should be quite a fun, simple build. And I think the painting is going to be the challenging part, because it is quite a complex and interesting hull pattern. So I'm just going to be using a few spraying techniques to try and bring that out without the use of stencils or decals. And on the back we've just got a nice top and bottom view of this colossal Battlestar. Would have been nice to have this in colour, but black and white will do. So looking at the parts, we've got sections for the upper part of the head section. A couple of large little pieces for the main body. And just engine pods, bag number 1. Engine pods, bag number 2. Hanger pods, port and starboard, with the interior flight deck. Some clear pieces. And the bottom side of the head section, along with some more detail panels, the stand, and a metal rod for the stand itself. And there's a few decals here. So this will be mainly for the flight deck and some of the detailing of the hull markings. So you've got the Pegasus nameplate, Colonial Fleet emblem, and there's just some of the landing strips. It'll be interesting to see how visible these will be once all of the flight pods are put together. Alright, so let's get building. Alright, so the first step is to assemble all of the flight bays, and being the Pegasus, it has 2 flight bays on each side, one on the top and one on the bottom, inverted. And the kit, to make that construction simple and as foolproof as possible, they've added all of these pegs and internal structure so you can line everything up and attach everything together as easily as possible. But of course that means that they've blocked off the entire flight bay, and as you saw before with the decals, they've provided kind of a fake perspective shot of the internal hangar bay. But I actually kind of want it to look all the way through, so when you look through one end you'll be able to see out the other. So unfortunately that means I'm going to have to cut away all of this internal structure, this wall here, all of these internal struts. It pretty much goes all the way through the construction. So there's the other side, and I've just got the flight deck just dry fitted there. Again, I'm going to have to cut away all of this internal structure. There's even pegs along here, and cover up all of these holes that fit over these pegs. So it's quite a bit of hacking I'm going to have to do, but I've got a plan roughly in my head. Unfortunately, it's going to be quite delicate work reattaching these decks to the structure, because I'm not going to have anything to line it up or to support against. So maybe a little bit tricky, but I'm sure I'll find a solution somehow. And I might attach a sheet of styrene over these holes here, just to beef up the flight deck a little bit and just cover up all of that internal Swiss cheese arrangement I've got going on. So what I'm going to do next is just hack everything away, and then I'll get on to constructing some sheet styrene for the rest of it. So first of all, I'm just going to fix the interbay insert here, which has got all of the launch tubes, onto the upper flight deck. So I can glue that in place, make sure it's all aligned and everything, and then I'll just clip off the top of the pegs that stick through on the other side. And now to cut out all of the internal structure, I'm just going to use my side cutters initially. So I left a little bit of the front and back walls intentionally there, just to give a little bit of support for the flight deck once it gets attached. And it also adds to the internal structure of the flight deck, as you can see down there. So already it's starting to look pretty good. So I might just clean up that little bit there and just remove these with a bit of sandpaper. So I ended up cleaning all of this out with a Dremel there, and here's the bottom half. So now that's nice and see-through. Now I just need to clip off these pegs. Now I'm just going to dry fit everything together and see how it's looking. Alright, so strangely enough, everything seems to fit together just as well, and I don't seem to have any issue lining everything up. Everything's sitting where it should be, so all those massive pegs in the middle just really aren't that necessary. But now I have nice, clean through flight decks on the top and the bottom. So what I'm going to have to do now is just clean up the floor a little bit, and then think about whether or not I want to attach some sheet styrene just to cover it up a little bit. And here's the other side. Alright. So for the upper flight deck, I've just measured out a strip of thin sheet styrene. This is 0.25 millimeters thick, so it's almost like a thin card thickness. And I've just measured out the length there. I can always trim that back if it's a little too long. So that'll serve to cover up those big holes in the middle. And it'll also act as a bit of a landing strip itself, with a bit of raised detail down the middle. So I'm going to glue that to the deck and then trim it back as necessary so it can fit on the top half. And there's the two different flight decks done, and I'm not too worried about these injection mold holes. I've already dry fitted and you can't really see them once it's all been put together. So the two main landing strips are down, and I've also gone ahead and completed the inner walls of the upper flight bays. So this is the upper section of the main flight pod, and just built up a little bit of detail, completely made up. I've looked up some reference photos of the flight bay, but a lot of this structure is just a completely artistic license. So I've put in an internal wall on both sides, some little holes there for the hangar bays. So yeah, it just makes the internal flight bay look a little bit more built up. I just didn't want it going straight to the external walls, being able to see all of this stuff on the way. And so these sheet styrene walls just hide all of that quite nicely. And I didn't really do much with the lower flight pods, since the opening's quite a lot smaller, so you're really not going to see much detail anyway. So yeah, I'm just happy to move on to start painting these and then putting them all together. So first I'm going to prime everything up and then get on to painting. And for the primer, I'm using Tamiya's Fine Surface Primer from a can. Okay, so to start off with, I'm going to use Vallejo Model Air Basic Grey 71047. Now with the base grey down, I'm going to do some detail painting, but before that I'm going to seal everything in with a coat of Tamiya TS13 Clear from a can. And to help with painting on the landing strips, I just need to first attach the landing strip decals for each pod. So the landing strip decals are way bigger than they need to be, just because they've used the outline of the flight deck just to help you place the strip in the right position. But of course that means you're going to end up with all of this extra film that you don't really need, so I'm just going to cut out the strip directly. Just being careful, just getting as close as I can, since I pretty much know where it's going to be lined up. Right, so with the decals firmly in place, I've just put on another coat of Tamiya TS13 Clear, just because I don't want these to lift off when I'm doing the masking, which I'm going to do right now. So I'm basically just going to extend the light grey strip across the entire length of the flight decks, and then do a dark grey strip down the middle. So I just need to mask off those and then get spraying. And the colour for this job is going to be Vallejo Model Air White Grey 71119. And now for the dark grey strip down the middle, I'm using Vallejo Model Air Black Grey 71055. And now just to seal these in with a coat of Tamiya's Flat Clear TS80, and then I can finally start putting these together. So the final thing to do with the flight pods is to put everything together. So now I'm just moving on to the 8 engine pods, and part of the construction is putting this little clear piece inside the pod, which sits quite far back. Then you put the other half on to close it up, but that will mean that this inside area here is going to be quite difficult to paint once it's all closed up. So what I'm going to do is just spray the inside of each of the cowling with a dark grey just to cover that up before attaching the two halves. Now I'm just assembling the FTL drive core. So as you can see, there's quite a few large gaps along the side of these panels, which is a shame because up until now the kit's been relatively well fitting, but as you can see, you can just see right through there. So, out comes the putty. So just a quick note before I glue the two halves of the main hull together, and that's this little protrusion here, which is on the top end, the bottom half, had quite just a large gap where it wasn't really filled in, so it was just all open there and on the other side. And when the two halves go together, these are just completely open. The engine FTL drive does kind of stick out the back a little bit, obscuring it a little bit, but you could still see just the open plastic moulding, which, isn't great for a kit like this. So as you can see, I've just filled that in with just a bit of sheet styrene, and the same on the other side. It was just a little square piece just to fill that in. It is a little bit disappointing. In fact, this kit so far has been a lot more work than I thought it would be. Emptying out the flight bays, filling in all those gaps, fixing up this huge gap here, and other little bits and pieces which I'll show in a little bit. But yeah, compared to the original Battlestar kit that I did a little while ago, this has been a lot more work, and it is slightly disappointing considering Moebius did such a fantastic job on the original Battlestar. There wasn't really much extra work needed on that at all, but with this kit I'm just finding little things all over the place that need just a little bit of extra attention, and things you really need to look out for. And I wouldn't have noticed that if I hadn't have dry fitted all the parts together beforehand. So there's little things that can catch you out. So anyway, carrying on. Alright, so I'm at a stage where I'm going to start painting, and I'm going to leave off the flight pods and all of the engine pods for now, because it'll just be easier to paint around those when they're separate, and then I'll add them back on later on. But I'm going to paint up the main hull of the ship and all the different pods, and to start off with I'm going to prime them using Tamiya's Fine Surface Primer from a can. So now with everything primed up, I'm just going to do a base coat of Vallejo Model Air Gunmetal 71072. Now with the gunmetal base coat applied, what I'm going to do now is start applying some paneling effects. So I want to cover the whole ship and lots of little panel details. And so this is basically the colour of the panels, and what I'm going to do is mask over lots of little squares and lines all over the ship, and then apply a different colour over the top, so all of the panels underneath will come out as this gunmetal colour. So I've just got a couple of types of masking tape, and I'm just going to lay these out as strips, and then just slice away tiny little panels, and then start the very tedious job of covering the whole ship in the bits of masking tape. So it'll be similar to what you see here with the raised panel details, just it'll just add to that overall effect. So with all of the strips laid out and sliced up into various thicknesses and lengths, I just need to start picking them out. Carefully. And then just start laying them out all over the model. Right, so here's the masking done on all of the engine pods, and made a bit of a start on the flight pod here, but it's becoming very tedious and very monotonous, and I think I will go insane before I finish. Either that or die of old age. And looking at it, I'm just not quite sure that it's working. It kind of looks placed. It doesn't really look random enough. It doesn't look to scale enough. I think I need much finer, smaller strips. Yeah, I just don't know. So I thought, well, why not try the stencil technique? Whereas you punch a hole in some, in this case I've just got some thin plastic card. So I've just drawn up a grid and then cut out some random slots. And then I can just lay this against the model and then just spray with a very thin coat of grey over the top and just rotate it and repeat the same pattern. I can do layers, I can do different colours, and maybe I'll get this done a lot quicker and a lot easier than trying to mask it up. Obviously it won't be as sharp as the masking. That's the one advantage that masking has, but with the stencil I'll be able to work a lot quicker, a lot more sort of free flow. I'll be able to rotate it, as I said, do different layers, do it on top of each other, do different colours, and just make a whole bunch of finer, more interesting, more randomised lines, which will hopefully give it a bit more scale. So I'm going to pull off all the masking off the flight pod, but I think I might leave it on the engine pods, because I've done all of those, and it would be a shame to waste all of these. So I'll just go ahead and spray this as I planned in it originally, and see how it looks, and then I can either go over it again with the stencil or just spray over it and start from scratch. But at least you'll get to see how this looks as I originally intended. Right, so I've got a bit of Vallejo Model Air Medium Gunship Grey, 71097, and I've thinned that down with some airbrush thinner, and I'm just going to lightly spray over all of the engine pods. So as you can see, I'm not intending to cover up the masking tape completely. I still want a little bit of that gunmetal to show through. Right, so that's had its light coat of medium grey, so now comes the even more tedious and careful part of picking off the masking, which is another disadvantage to doing this. So there you can see the subtle difference between the gunmetal and the grey. I think this would have looked pretty cool if there was a lot more masking going on, but you know, I've only got so many years left on this world. Don't want to spend them all masking. I think this will look pretty cool with the stencil layering over the top, But yeah, I was not going to have the patience to cover the entire ship with this, and it's just something that I would have wanted to do more of, like smaller strips and way more of them to make it look really effective. So it is a good technique, but it definitely has its uses on maybe different projects, like I did with the Star Destroyer I did a while ago. Did quite a bit of masking on that. Alright, so you can see the overall effects there. So now I've just got to go and pick off all of the rest of them. So I had a bit of a trial run with the stencil over the engine pods, and as you can see that's how it's turned out. So I've got the gunmetal panels and also the medium gunship grey panels there. It does kind of lose a little definition when the light's not shining straight on those panels. So I'm definitely going to need to go over it again with a lighter colour grey, I think. Been pretty happy with how that's turned out. So now I just need to apply the stenciling technique to the rest of the ship, so basically just on the base gunmetal colour. And again, just using the same medium gunship grey as before, 71097. I'm just going to thin that down a little bit and then spray it onto the flight pod. So starting out, just placing the stencil as close as I can get it to the model, and then just start spraying. And so there you can start to see the effect that that has. Not quite as sharp as the masking, but it's a real nice, easy, quick way of getting some panel definition onto the model. And I can also do it in layers, so I can go over the same parts as before and create kind of a more layered and panelled texture. Can also flip it around, go the other way. Now I can come in with the other stencil and spray on a few different lines. So there you can see it starting to build up quite nicely. And now with the panelling done, I've just masked off some areas to spray a darker grey, and for that I'm using Vallejo Model Grey. And now for the red accents, I'm going to use Vallejo Model Colour Dark Red. And now for the red accents on the flight pods, I'm just going to brush paint on the same red colour. So a bit of progress on the engine pods. So I used the basic grey colour that I used on the front of the ship just to darken up the midsection and this little bit of greebling at the back there. Actually that's towards the front of the pod, so it should go this way if you align it with the ship. I did a bit of a lighter grey on the little round section there, and also did just a very subtle panelling effect on the darker grey section in the middle, just with the medium gunship grey that I used over the gunmetal. And actually for the engine, I did experiment with doing a lighter grey stencil panelling effect, so you can see a few lighter grey panels on the engine, but I decided that it wasn't going to quite work for the whole ship. So it's just on the engines that those lighter grey panels will appear, which I think is okay because the engines are quite a separate piece from the rest of the ship, so it won't look too out of place. And for the engine exhaust, I just sprayed it with black because I really don't like how the model's been put together with the little clear piece in there. I'll see if I can shine some light on it, but it just didn't fit completely in the model. So basically the one end of the piece didn't quite reach the bottom of the space in there. So there's a bit of a gap at the bottom for each and every one of these clear pieces that were included for the engine. So that's just another little disappointing thing with this kit. Some pieces just really don't fit together that well. And I didn't really want to do a simulated lighting effect because the rest of the ship is not going to be lighted, or I'm not going to put any like lighted windows or anything, so I just made it black just to indicate that the model is not lighted and everything's off. And so the next step is to apply a pin wash to all of the panel lines all across the ship, and for that I'm using Vallejo Model Wash Black. Now with that step done, I think it's time to finally start putting everything together. So, just starting with the engine pods, just going to drop some glue into these slots. Hopefully that'll be enough to stick them on with all the paint in the way. Now for the flight pods, I'm going to glue these on while the ship is upside down because gravity will assist me here in keeping them in place while they set. And so I'm basically locking these faces of the pod arms. I'll slot in there and then gravity will stick it to the bottom of the ship inside. Basically like that. Okay, so the name detail was just painted with a bit of white grey, and then a little bit of a wash of light grey around the edge just to make it pop a bit. And so the next step is to apply the extensive range of decals, all three of them. So I've got the central crest there, and then for the name itself I'm just going to cut out the little serial number, because I won't be using the name itself obviously, and then just applying it under the name down here. But before I do that, I just want to apply a gloss coat to where I'm going to put the three decals, just to make sure that they fit nice and snug and don't have any air bubbles trapped underneath. So I'm just going to brush paint on a bit of gloss varnish using this Vallejo acrylic, and then I'll apply the decals. So while I'm waiting for the gloss to dry, I might as well stick on all of the guns around the ship, and I've gone ahead and painted those with just the basic Vallejo grey that I used before, just a simple base coat for them, and it's just a matter of having on some glue and dropping them in. And with the decal in place, I'm just going to apply some setting solution, in this case some microsol, to help the decal settle into all of the recessed areas. And with the decals set in place, I'm just going to brush paint on a bit of Vallejo matte varnish, just to seal them in and remove the glossy sheen. Alright, so we're nearing the end of the build now, so for the last few stages I'm just going to apply a little bit of a wash and do a little bit of weathering. But first I'm just going to apply this Vallejo light grey wash on the red highlights, just to blend them in a little bit with the rest of the ship. Now to start the weathering process, I've just got a little bit of sponge, and I'm just going to use the two base colours, the gunmetal and the medium gunship grey, and I'm just going to lightly apply little bits of that around the ship with both colours. Not too much, just a little bit. So got the grey on the end of the sponge there, I'll just dab some of it out on a paper towel and then just work my way around. Just lightly applying it to some areas just to indicate a little bit of stressing, a little bit of wear and tear on the metal surface. Something like that. And so after studying quite a lot of reference material of the CGI model and screenshots, There are quite a few little rusted panels all over the ship, and for that I'm just going to use Vallejo Rust Colour 71080 and just dry brush that on to some of the panels around the ship. Not too overwhelming. Actually, I don't even know if it's rust. It's just a rust coloured dry brushing effect on some parts of the ship. Just little bits like that. And now to build up the battle damage, so I've just got an old kind of crappy brush here, just so I can bash it against the model. And I've got just a little bit of black paint. I'm just going to sort of dry brush it on. I'm going to wipe away at least most of the paint with the paper towel. And then I'm just going to dab it all over an area here. Like that. Then I'm going to get a cotton bud and just wipe away most of this. And just sort of blend it around a little bit there. And then apply it again over the top, but in a small area. So just sort of building up a few layers, then wiping it away and blending it, and just to make it kind of really random and a bit more dispersed, so it looks a bit more natural. Let's get into that edge there. Yeah, something like that. And then finally, with a finer brush, just applying black and then just making a clear sort of scarring. And so the black faded background is more like the scoring, and the black line is more the direct effect of the weapon. Just to finish off with the stand base, I've given it a coat of semi-gloss black, and now I'm going to do a top layer of the gunmetal that I used for the base coat of the Pegasus. I just want this to match the previous stand that I did for the original Battlestar Galactica, so it's going to be the same colour as the ship, but it should be okay. And now the last step is just to give this a little bit of a dry brush with some aluminium. Alright, so here's the beast all done and dusted. And it's just sitting on a paper towel here because the sound of this plastic screeching against the table is not something I want to subject you to. But yeah, I'm overall really happy with how this has come out. The build itself was a little bit more involved and frustrating than I was prepared for. But the issues that were presented weren't insurmountable, and I managed to get through them, especially the blocked up flight pods and the various gaps and little fit issues around the rest of the ship. And as expected, the painting definitely took up most of the time. Now all of the stenciling and just it kind of looks simple, but there's quite a lot of detail involved in just finishing everything up. So all of the different coloured panels on the engines, the sort of internal bays here needed different colours and various stripes and bits and pieces. So what I thought was going to be quite a simple ship when I opened the box turned out to be quite an involved build, as I hope the video conveys. But you know, it's not too challenging, so definitely not too bad for a beginner or intermediate leveled modeler. And just swing it around here so you can get all the different angles. You'll notice I didn't put a clear coat over the top, a flat clear coat or a semi-gloss, just because I didn't want to lose the nice contrast between the metallic gunmetal and the medium gunship grey. I was afraid I'd lose all of the kind of difference in the reflection there if I was to just blast everything with a flat coat. I really like how it catches the light at different angles and kind of blends in with other angles, so I was kind of happy to leave that. It does mean the paint is not protected, so I'll just remember not to have to handle it too much, otherwise the paint might start to rub off. But Vallejo paint, it hardens up quite a lot as it cures, so over the coming weeks this paint will just get harder and harder, and it shouldn't be too much of an issue in the long run. So just coming in for a closer look from bow to stern. Yeah, now this a funny kind of texture, especially on the head. I can't remember if that was from the model or just the primer I put down. I kind of only really noticed it once I started painting, so I'm not quite sure where that came from. The decal went down really nicely, especially compared to the original Battlestar decals, which just shattered and broke up at any slightest force, so that was quite nice. Luckily there was only really 3 decals that I needed. Yeah, and the engine's there, bit of battle damage. I didn't really detail up the FTL drive much. It's basically just got the medium grey and the gunmetal colours in there. I think the mould is detailed enough really, without too much paintwork, to look pretty good. Yeah, just taking a look at the ventral side. Yeah, I'm really pleased with how these panels came out. Although it's interesting though, a lot of reference material for the Pegasus makes it look kind of flattish grey, kind of a light flat grey in some screenshots. But if you look at some YouTube videos of the Pegasus, when it does a lot of flybys, there is a noticeable metallic grey reflecting off certain surfaces, so it's kind of a tricky one. Sometimes this overall paint job does look too dark and too metallic compared to some reference material, but I think overall it does have kind of a metallic finish to it. That's what the instructions say to paint it in, anyway, at least. And yet we can see all the way through the flight pods there. So pretty pleased that I managed to hack those out. It definitely doesn't make any difference when you're just looking at it on display, but at least you can kind of angle it and look through. Even if you can't see the entire flight deck that I painted. It's just completely gone now, but hey, at least we know it's there. And here it is next to the OG Battlestar Galactica, which I built up a little while ago. And as you can see, the difference in the overall sort of monotone effect of the original versus the super detailed Pegasus. I really wanted to make the original as close to the TV show as possible, so it's very bleached and lacking in detail. The kit itself has enough detail, I think, without too much wash or adding any detail. So it was a decision that a lot of people disagreed with, but over the years I've kind of come to really appreciate the monotone look of the original. It kind of makes it look massive and gives it a true sense of scale to these massive Battlestars. And it's a nice contrast versus the Pegasus, which I've really detailed up, so I kind of went to town on that one. And yeah, so there they are next to each other, the same scale of course, 1:41.05. And up next will be the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, which is going to be quite a lot smaller than these two. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this build, even if it has been one of the longer ones. I just wanted to get as much detail in there as possible, so as always, if you've got any questions or comments, please leave them below and I'll do my best to answer them. And as usual, I'll be leaving photos of the kit on my various social media channels, so Facebook, Instagram, so be sure to go and check those out, and I'll put links in the description. And if you're still watching, then thanks for making it this far, and a big thanks to everyone who watches at least part of my video. I know it's cool just to jump in and see what you need and then jump out again, especially for building this, or if you want inspiration or any guidance on building these kits. So I'm happy to provide. So until next time, so say will.